30 days to breathe, but at what cost? The latest on the back and forth between Canada and the U.S. on tariffs.
Oops. Ontario PC leader Doug Ford caught commenting about Trump on a hot mic during a campaign stop in Etobicoke. His explanation coming up.
And World Cancer Day, from the Terry Fox Foundation to the rising cost of paying for treatment. We're going to take a look at the battle ahead.
This is Live at 5. Good evening. I'm Bakari Sapp.
And I'm Lena Latifat. Thank you for joining us here on Live at 5. PC leader Doug Ford is getting a lot of attention over a hot mic moment on the campaign trail.
In the election day, was I happy this guy won? 100% I was. Then the guy pulled out the knife and used it.
Okay, so here's the moment that Ford's being questioned about. Ford was heard yesterday saying, quote, election day, was I happy this guy won? 100% I was. Well, he then went on to say how Trump put a knife into Canada. Ford called a snap election because of the U.S. tariff threats, saying he needed a new mandate to protect Ontario in the face of unprecedented economic uncertainty.
And Ford's opponents are reacting on the campaign trail today. Let's bring in CP24's Phil Perkins for a closer look at this. Phil, this is ammunition for the opposition.
Yeah, they're doing whatever they can to try to kind of put this in Premier Ford's face. We just spoke with Queen's Park Observer reporter Sabrina Nanji, saying that they're basically framing Doug Ford as basically a hypocrite, saying initially that he was happy, as you see in this clip here, 100% happy that Donald Trump won the election, and then quickly said that eventually later that day that he would never support the guy ever again. And so they're saying this shows who he really is, whatever that means. We'll get more reaction from the opposition party. But Premier Ford was asked today to explain himself a little bit about that hot mic incident where he seemed to flip-flop all in one sentence. Here's what he had to say.
I always believe in working with anyone. And yeah, on the hot mic, yeah, he makes me swear once in a while. I think he makes a lot of people swear in this country. So I thought it'd be a little different, a little change, but obviously he decided to pull the knife out and stab us. And when I'm there, my number one job is to protect Ontario, to protect Canadians. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I will fight with every single tool I have in our toolbox to make sure we defend the people of Ontario.
And that's what opposition leaders are saying about this, the fact that, Premier Ford, like everybody else, knew that during the election campaign trail down south that Donald Trump talked about these tariffs. And so saying that you were happy that he won the election, knowing that these tariffs could be coming, and then saying that you're upset about them, calling the snap election kind of seems somewhat hypocritical. So here's Liberal leader Bonnie Crombie and NDP leader Merritt Stiles.
Donald Trump threatened us, threatened our economy, threatened to impose punitive tariffs that would hurt us. And that's the guy that Doug Ford wanted to support. That's simply outrageous. He doesn't have the best interests of Ontario in his heart. And I think that statement, caught on a hot mic when he didn't know other people could be listening, shows his true character.
It doesn't surprise me at all that he would say something like that, that's how he really feels. I think probably the one thing I would say is that, it's a little bit sad that while, Doug Ford clearly is a big fan of Donald Trump doesn't seem to be aware of who Doug Ford is.
And so they are definitely trying to use this to try to, trying to chip away at the support for PC leader Doug Ford, as we are still having this provincial election. People going to the polls on February 27th, while these 25% tariffs are still going to be delayed, that 30 days there. And so I think we've all learned in this situation. I think PC leader Doug Ford has learned that Mike's always hot, guys. Always hot. You're always live. Back to you.
Yeah, that's an important lesson we all have to learn. Phil, thanks so much for this.
No problem.
Well, Ottawa is providing more details about the fentanyl czar it agreed to create in an effort to avoid U.S. tariffs.
And the federal government says that the person who holds the office will serve as liaison between Canada and the U.S. on cross-border efforts to curb fentanyl trafficking. It's being added to Canada's $1.3 billion border security plan. Trump has falsely claimed massive amounts of fentanyl are entering the U.S. with Canada when it's actually less than 1%. But Public Safety Minister David McGuinty says that combating fentanyl, it's still important.
That fentanyl czar position that we announced as well, we're already beginning now to lend shape to what that role would be, which is very much integrating different actors in this space. We need folks who can reach out to our Health Canada folks, because we're standing up new laboratories to, for example, trace where are the precursors for fentanyl coming from? When did they come into the country? Trace and track. So we'll be doing that as well.
And Minister McGuinty was in Emerson, Manitoba earlier today discussing border security along with the Premier of Manitoba. Border officials demonstrated a security device that can identify toxic substances like fentanyl, its analogs, and other opioids.
And Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly says that implementing the border security plan is going to be key to seeing the threat of U.S. tariffs dropped completely.
We're a government. We need to make sure that these are not only words, but they're transferred into actions. And that's what we're doing. Black Hawk helicopters are already patrolling the border. We already have drones that have been bought that are patrolling the border. We now have changed the opening hours of our border posts across the country. And we need to continue to do that.
And CP24 spoke to CTV's public safety analyst Chris Lewis about these new border security measures.
There's a lot more fentanyl coming north than there is going south, and a ton of guns, as Steve said. It's taken that to really have any movement at all on securing our border when there's hundreds and hundreds of guns coming across nonstop and killing people. Let's put some meat to this and give the RCMP and CBSA the people they need to effectively do the job, not just a couple of black helicopters that are going to allegedly put fear in the hearts of drug smugglers. It needs to be much bigger than that.
And some elements of the government's border plan will require legislative changes to be passed by Parliament, which that's not scheduled to sit again until March 24th.
Well, truckers say the now delayed tariffs being threatened by U.S. President Donald Trump could wreak havoc on their industry.
The president of the Canadian Trucking Alliance says the fallout could be the final nail in the coffin for many of his group's 5,000 transport companies already struggling because of weaker consumer demand. The manufacturing sector is seen as particularly vulnerable, which includes tens of billions of dollars in auto parts and vehicles hauled by truck to the U.S. from Canada. And Dennis Darby, CEO of the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters, joined CP24 Breakfast with more reaction.
Well, I think everybody breathed a sigh of relief collectively, last night when it was announced that it was a delay in the implementation, subject to some terms. But I don't think we should think we're out of the woods yet. I mean, President Trump has been quite clear about what his objectives are from an economic point of view, and we've done our best to make a case that this is destructive to both Canada and U.S. Very, very tough on consumers on both sides. So we need to use this period to help our governments as they negotiate, because 1.8 million Canadians who work in manufacturing and selling $600 billion worth of goods a year to the U.S. Are lying the balance right now, at least a large part of it.
Darby says many Canadian companies are already pulling back on new investments and hiring as they take a wait-and-see approach to the possibility of these tariffs.
And speaking of, China has countered President Donald Trump's tariffs with several of its own on select U.S. imports.
The country also announced an antitrust investigation into Google as part of its response. China and the U.S. had engaged in a trade war, if you'll remember, back in 2018. But this time, analysts say Beijing is in a better position to counter with a slew of measures across different sectors of the economy. It plans to implement a 15% tariff on coal and liquefied natural gas products, as well as a 10% tariff on crude oil, agricultural machinery, and large engine cars imported from the U.S. The tariffs are expected to take effect next Monday, unless China works out a deal to delay tariffs the way Canada and Mexico have.
Well, European Union trade ministers, they met in Poland today as the 27-nation bloc also faces the threat of U.S. tariffs.
Officials gathered in Warsaw to discuss global competitiveness and transatlantic relations. President Trump has threatened to impose duties on EU imports since taking office last month. The bloc's leaders have been in contact with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau after he threatened to place retaliatory tariffs on American goods if Canada was slapped with tariffs. Now, the European Trade Commissioner says there will be a firm response if the EU is hit unfairly.
It's now 5:10, holding at 7 below zero. Let's get a check on the evening commute. Let's see, CP24's traffic specialist, Adjoa and Sia Yabwa. Are people able to get to where they're going without being frustrated?
No, not in the GTA. Why would you do that to me? I can't accommodate that. If you are making your way out, what I can tell you is there are a couple of problems in areas you probably want to avoid, so I can do that for you. So if you're on the eastbound lanes of the 403, this is at Cawthra Eastgate. I've been watching the stall for the last little bit. Right lane is blocked. Still a number of lanes available. Still a little bit of a delay on the approach, but at least there are some lanes that are accessible. And then if your travels take you on the eastbound 401, this is the ramp that takes you to the northbound 427. You have that right lane and shoulder block because of a stall, and so that's creating quite a delay in the collectors from before Dixie. If you're trying to get onto the northbound 427, you have no choice. You have to stick with the collectors. The express lanes just take you and continue onto the 401 East and the northbound 410. Patience is what you're going to need because it's going to take you a while to get into Brampton. Delays, they start from Steeles and they continue pretty much all the way up towards Sandalwood. I'll send it back to you both.
All right, Adjoa, good to know, and thanks so much. Well, Porter Airlines is expanding service to Hamilton Airport.
The company announced that it is launching nonstop daily service to Halifax, Calgary, Edmonton, and Vancouver. The flights from John C. Munro Hamilton International Airport in Mount Hope are going to start in June. A number of airport terminal enhancements are also being put in place over the coming months.
In over 18 years of flying, we have never started service at a new airport with this amount of coverage. All of our Hamilton flights will operate with our new Embraer E195-E2 aircraft. Our E195 fleet is helping us change the definition of economy air travel by offering highly competitive pricing for a far superior product and an enjoyable passenger experience for everyone who travels with us. Economy is a segment that airlines shy away from, either because they focus their energy on satisfying the so-called elite passengers, or on the other end of the spectrum with a discount model that asks you to pay more for everything.
The city of Hamilton, we all know, has long been literally a gateway to the world. We're Ontario's largest overnight cargo hub here at this airport. A key logistic corridor is what our city is known for. We're home to Deepwater Port, of course, that keeps trade moving across Canada and around the globe. Today we add another exciting chapter to that story, one that takes passenger air service to new heights and marks a defining milestone in Hamilton's status as transportation and logistics superhub.
And Porter says it hopes to fly to other destinations from Hamilton by next year.
Right now it's 5:12, holding at 7 below zero. This is Live at 5.
Well, 2 people are dead following an attempted home invasion in eastern Ontario. We're going to talk to our crime analyst, Steve Ryan, right after this. Welcome back. 2 people have been shot dead during an attempted home invasion in eastern Ontario.
This happened Sunday night in South Glengarry. This is near Cornwall. OPP say the 2 people were shot while trying to force their way into a home. A third suspect got away. The people inside the home at the time, they were not hurt, but they were taken into custody and a firearm was seized. So OPP says no charges have been laid. They've since been released. The investigation, that is ongoing. And for more on this case, we're joined live by CP24's crime analyst, Steve Ryan. Okay, Steve, let's talk about this. The 2 people, they were taken into custody. They were released. The investigation's still going on.
Yeah, it is. And just because you are arrested doesn't mean you need to be charged right away. So you can be released unconditionally. And if the investigation gives the police evidence to believe under reasonable grounds that an offense has been committed, well, then they can rearrest you and charge you. So let's, for context, talk about self-defense. The criminal code says that a person can use as much force as deemed necessary, including lethal force, if there is imminent threat of grievous bodily harm or death to themselves or to someone else. So this can't be a spidey sense. There needs to be hard evidence that your life is in imminent danger or somebody else's life is in imminent danger, and then you can use as much force as is deemed necessary. So this may be the gray area where the OPP may want to get some legal guidance from the Crown's office before they lay a charge, because it really is an unknown area when it comes to what is self-defense and what is not self-defense, and when is too far, too far.
Yeah, I want to make it clear that it was the homeowners, the victims in this case, who were later taken into police custody after these two robbers were shot. A third suspect still at large. Steve, that person obviously has a lot of information. How important is it for investigators to track them down?
Oh, that third person is key. So the information that will be crucial to this investigation will be what was said when the people broke in. What type of threats did they make to you or to someone else? Yeah. You can't just shoot and kill somebody, as crazy as it sounds, for just breaking into your house. There needs to be more than just the break and enter. There has to be some imminent fear of death or grievous bodily harm to you or to somebody else. And then you use as much force as is deemed necessary. So it's got to be proportionate. It's got to be proportionate to the threat that you're faced.
But what do you, I'm just going to interject here for one moment. What do you do if you think somebody is breaking into your home and you want to protect yourself, your family? How do you know what the right move is?
You don't. And that's a good question. This is why this area is so gray. So if it was you or I and we're at home and then somebody's breaking into the house, going downstairs to see who it is one step. Now, what that person says to me is step two. And many have argued, and I certainly don't condone this, a dead person can't say what they said to you or not said to you. So if you take matters into your own hands and that person is now dead on your kitchen floor because you decided that there was imminent threat to you or somebody else, grievous bodily harm or death, what the person said to you is between you, this guy, and his maker.
See, what is the baseline for this, threat level? Because somebody's in your house. Like that should be enough of a threat.
And this may be why the OPP released these two individuals unconditionally right now, because they need guidance from the Crown's office, because it really is a question as to what exactly was said, what did you feel, and why did you feel that way. You can't just say, I was scared somebody broke in and I shot and killed somebody. There needs to be more than that. So these two that were released, perhaps they gave the right explanation to the investigators. Now they want to make sure that their case is going in the right direction. This is why they may want to be seeking guidance from a Crown's office.
All right, CP24's crime analyst Steve Ryan live in studio tonight working on this story. Steve, thank you.
Of course.
Well, more details are coming out during the trial of two girls charged in the swarming death of a Toronto homeless man.
Yeah, 2 of the 8 girls allegedly involved in the fatal assault are currently on trial in front of a judge alone. Today, the Crown alleged one of the girls, who was 14 at the time, could be seen on security footage holding a sharp object. The lead detective told the court he couldn't identify the object. The prosecution alleges that girl delivered the blow that led to Kenneth Lee's death. The trial for the 2 girls is expected to last about 2 weeks.
And police in York Region are trying to identify a person who left a dog tied to a pole at a park in Georgina.
This footage was taken on Sunday morning at a dog park near Lake Drive South and Robert Street. A person can be seen getting out of a black pickup truck with a dog. They then walk over to a pole and tie the dog to it before they head back to their truck and drive off. Police were eventually called to the scene where they found the animal, which was in good health.
Yeah, the abandoned dog is a Cane Corso and has been since named Winter. It's now at the Georgina Animal Shelter, but police say it's not yet ready for adoption. The truck involved is this black pickup. Well, you saw it earlier. It has a distinct black roof and dark rims. Anyone with information, you're asked to come forward.
You're watching Live at 5 on Toronto's Breaking News, CP24.
Today's World Cancer Day. Coming up next, we're going to take a look at a new survey on the cost of cancer in this country.
Well, this just into CP24. The Aga Khan has died at the age of 88. Prince Karim Al Husseini was the spiritual leader of Ismaili Muslims all over the world. His death was announced by the Aga Khan Development Network. Keep it here on CP24 as we keep a close eye on this story. We are working on reaction as well.
And police are investigating a deadly mass shooting at an adult education center in Sweden.
Authorities say about 10 people were killed at a school located 200 kilometers west of Stockholm, but they did not provide an exact number of fatalities. Sweden's prime minister says it is the worst mass shooting in his country's history. The local police chief says the gunman is believed to be among the dead. Officials are still trying to determine a motive. The facility is for adults who didn't complete their formal education, but is located on a campus that also houses schools for children.
Today is World Cancer Day, and the theme of this year's campaign is United by Unique.
This message acknowledges that cancer is more than just a medical diagnosis. It's a deeply personal matter. Behind every diagnosis lies a unique human story, stories of grief, pain, healing, resilience, and love.
And a new survey is highlighting the cost of cancer treatment.
CP24's Beatrice Faisman joins us live with the latest data from Angus Reid and the Canadian Cancer Society. Beatrice.
Lena Bakari, the latest data shows nearly half of Canadians will be diagnosed with cancer at some point in their lifetimes, 45%. And if not directly, most of us experience it indirectly through family, through friends. There's a deep financial burden also associated with being diagnosed with cancer, despite the fact that we've got a public health care system here in this province. The latest data from Angus Reid showing that almost a quarter of Canadians diagnosed with cancer report facing substantial out-of-pocket costs, which made it hard for them to make ends meet. When you talk about out-of-pocket costs, the treatment is free, but the prescription drugs associated often are not. If you don't have insurance, travel costs, accommodation costs, home care costs, devices, things like that. If you don't live in the city of Toronto and you're coming, let's say, from Northern Ontario to get treatment at world-class hospital like Princess Margaret, all of that costs money. Also, when it comes to saving for retirement, people saying 40% of them, in fact, saying they're concerned that these out-of-pocket costs are going to impact their retirement savings. And then also when you look at things like job loss, people are taking a temporary unpaid leave or missing out on things like promotions or raises because of having to take time off to deal with potentially a life or death diagnosis. All of that on top of the emotional and mental struggles that come with a cancer diagnosis. And here's a bit of what we heard from Shachi Curl from Angus Reid Institute about this survey.
But I think some of the key takeaways are really stark around job loss, around job suppression, and just the fact that for so many people living with cancer, that is actually a great news story. But the challenge is around how to make it so that people living with cancer can find some financial burden eased.
Many others in this survey reported having difficulty making ends meet, making their mortgage or rent payments as well. And so underlined in this survey as well is the fact that many of the people who are diagnosed with cancer who have out-of-pocket costs find it incredibly difficult to plan for their future, something that's already complicated by a cancer diagnosis in and of itself. So some pretty stark data in this latest survey. Back to you.
Having cancer is hard. Paying for cancer, just as hard. Beatrice Faisman reporting live tonight. Thanks so much for this, Beatrice. It's now 5:26 -7. You're watching Live at 5.
Mirvish has announced its lineup for the upcoming season. We're going to tell you which plays are coming to town next.
Well, Mirvish Productions is bringing a bevy of hit musicals to the Toronto stage as part of its 2025-2026 season.
MJ the Musical celebrates the career of Michael Jackson. Mirvish says it's going to run this September and October. The lineup also includes A Beautiful Noise, the Neil Diamond musical that'll be in April and May next year, and Some Like It Hot, which will run in February of next year.
It's 5:29 -7. You're watching Live at 5.
Doug Ford's being questioned over comments that he made about Donald Trump on a hot microphone. We're going to have the latest from the campaign trail next. "30 days to breathe, but at what cost?" The latest in the back and forth between Canada and the U.S. on tariffs.
Well, oops. Ontario PC leader Doug Ford caught commenting about Donald Trump on a hot mic during a campaign stop in Etobicoke. His explanation coming up.
World Cancer Day, from the Terry Fox Foundation to the rising cost of paying for treatment. We're going to look at the battle ahead.
You're watching Live at 5. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Lena Latifat.
And I'm Bakari Savage. Ontario PC leader Doug Ford's getting a lot of attention over a hot mic moment on the campaign trail.
In the election day, was I happy this guy won? 100% I was. Then the guy pulled out the knife.
Okay, you just heard it. That's the moment Ford is being questioned about. He called a snap election because of the U.S. tariff threat, saying he needed a new mandate to protect Ontario in the face of unprecedented economic uncertainty. And tonight, he's being questioned about those remarks.
Yeah, Ford's opponents are reacting as well on the campaign trail today. So let's bring in CP24's Phil Perkins, who joins us from the newsroom for a closer look at this. Phil, the lesson?
You're always live. You're always live. Camera's always on. I'm still learning that. I've been in the biz for over a dozen years now. I got to realize mic is always hot. You never know, especially with all these automated control rooms. You never know when they can go to you. So you got to make sure that you are acting correct. And, Doug Ford owned that. He talked about it today when he was asked about that hot mic incident, when he was asked about if he supported Donald Trump. As you see it right here, he says he was 100% happy that he had won, but then said in that same breath that he, as in Donald Trump, stabbed us with these 25% tariffs. And that is where some of the opposition leaders have some umbrage with what he had to say. But before that, let's hear from PC leader Doug Ford explain himself a little bit.
We got attacked unprovoked. We're sitting here thinking we have great neighbors, which we do, best in the world, in my opinion. And all of a sudden, he launches an economic war. And the whole world is watching us right now. Two of the closest friends in the world, cherished allies, been shoulder to shoulder, and all of a sudden he gets in and not just a little attack. He wants a full-out economic war. That does not work.
And that's where that word unprovoked seems to upset some of the opposition leaders here, and that's where they're using this ammunition today, no doubt. The fact that we knew that Donald Trump during the election campaign loves the word T. He loves tariffs. He loves using that as leverage. And he talked about putting tariffs on Canada and Mexico and China going into this. And so what they feel is the fact that Doug Ford said he was happy that he had won, knowing this stuff, and then also to then learn about these tariffs, start this provincial election that we're still currently in right now. People can vote February 27th. They think it's a little bit hypocritical of the premier. So here's what Liberal leader Bonnie Crombie had to say, as well as Queen's Park observer Sabrina Nanji, kind of breaking this down a little bit.
Somehow there was a benefit in it for him if Donald Trump would succeed, even if it meant that it would hurt Ontario and our economy through punitive tariffs. That's the character of this premier.
Now that we have this 30-day pause on the tariffs, it sort of takes away or at least undermines, his rationale for going to the polls early. And we know that, that sort of fits into the narrative of his main political rivals. They say this is self-serving and opportunistic. And for Ford to essentially admit that he was happy Trump won, I think has raised a lot of eyebrows.
And Nanji also, mentioned how could this hot mic incident stay with Doug Ford as we head into the polls. Early polling starts February 20th until 22nd. It's also election day is the 27th. We'll have to wait and see. But of course, as we know, covering Queen's Park for quite some time throughout the Ford experience, there's a lot of things that has happened under his watch that's seemingly not sticking right now. He still holds that healthy lead when it comes to support from Ontarians. Bakari, Lena, back to you.
Okay, a little bit of drama on the campaign.
A little bit of drama.
Just a little bit.
That's what these are for.
Live in the newsroom tonight. Thanks so much for this, Phil. A little bit of drama on the roads? I don't know. Let's find out. CP24's traffic specialist, Adjoa Nsiayabwa, keeping a close eye on the drive.
Yeah, a little bit of drama, but not of the political kind. It's of the traffic kind. So if you're making your way out, it's going to create a little bit of a delay if you're headed on the eastbound lanes of the 403. Very slow from here, Ontario, out towards Cawthra Eastgate. Here's the reason. This situation's been there for over an hour. It's a stalled vehicle, right lane and shoulder blocked, tow just hooking up that vehicle. So hopefully that's a sign that this situation will clear. Now, if your travels take you on to the 401 eastbound, still pretty busy in the collectors, starting from Dixie onto the ramp that takes you to the northbound 427. But some really good news. We had a stall. It was in the right lane. That situation did all clear. And if you're traveling and headed towards the QEW, still pretty busy as you make your way across the top of the city and head in towards Mississauga, Oakville, and into Burlington. Still very, very slow. I'll send it back to both of you, Lena and Bakari.
All right, thanks a lot, Adj. Well, the risk of a trade war with the U.S., it's on hold for now, but what about the campaign to buy Canadian products?
Yeah, are shoppers still thinking local when they make a purchase? CP24's Melissa Duggan has been checking. She joins us live. Melissa, people are really passionate about this.
Yeah, and I think people are really paying attention to this all. You know, this was supposed to be Tariff Tuesday if it wasn't for that phone call yesterday with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and U.S. President Donald Trump. Now that's on pause, kind of just kicking the can down the road for the next little while. 30 days is the day we're looking at from now when those tariffs could come into play. So some shoppers we've been talking to say that maybe their eyes have been opened a little bit more to the power that their dollar has, how those choices when they're in stores, grocery stores especially, when they can choose between a product made in Canada and a product made in the U.S., that maybe this time they're going to go towards those Canadian-made products and really kind of seek them out over the next little while. Of course, not everyone's on board with that, but also a lot of reaction we're getting to just on the whole matter of this whole tariff talk. I want to share a little bit of the feedback we're getting. Have a listen.
I wasn't surprised. I figured we would probably make some sort of concessions, and it's all political, right? Trump needs to be seen to be doing something. So I feel like it's a good reminder to buy Canadian anyway. I feel like we need to be getting away from our dependence on the US, and obviously we're partners. We have to depend on certain things, but maybe not so heavily.
I wasn't that relieved at all. I figured he was going to do this, as always kind of his plan was to bluff us into doing something that we weren't ready to do necessarily. And we'll see if we've done what he wants after 30 days. He'll probably pause it again.
I'm outside of the St. Lawrence market right now. If you go on their Instagram page, the first words in their bio are shop local. So there certainly are different alternative places and locations you can seek out in our city to find those local items that people might be more curious about at this point. But certainly after that talk between Trump and Trudeau, that just kind of buying some time as, politicians figure out what's next, but also consumers, as maybe they have this north-south trade relationship top of mind over the next little while, and know that their decisions when they're buying things that they can have an impact. So certainly people around here are going to be paying attention to what happens in about 30 days from now-ish to see what's going to go on there. But also, it's going to be interesting to keep an eye on their shopping habits. Are we going to see more of a focus on that buy local mentality in the weeks, months ahead? Back to you.
Okay. Outside of St. Lawrence Market, CP24's Melissa Duggan. Thanks, Melissa. Well, Ottawa is providing more details about the fentanyl czar it agreed to create in an effort to avoid U.S. tariffs.
The federal government says the person who holds the office will serve as a liaison between Canada and the U.S. on cross-border efforts to curb fentanyl trafficking. It's being added to Canada's $1.3 billion border security plan. Trump has falsely claimed massive amounts of fentanyl are entering the U.S. through Canada when it's actually less than 1%. But Public Safety Minister David McGuinty says combating fentanyl, that's still important.
That doesn't mean that there isn't pressure on Canada. We need to continue that good work. The RCMP has broken up some 47 laboratories in Canada, including the largest single bust in Canadian history of 95,500,000 lethal doses of fentanyl just a little while ago. We also have to remember it's a two-way street. We have some drugs, narcotics coming from the United States. This will also be part and parcel of that fentanyl response. So we're looking at this as one whole, and we have to keep reminding ourselves that this is a joint challenge, and we're going to tackle it together.
Minister McGuinty was in Emerson, Manitoba earlier today discussing border security along with the Premier of Manitoba. So border officials demonstrated a security device that can identify toxic substances such as fentanyl, its analogs, and other opioids.
Well, Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly says implementing the border security plan will be key to seeing the threat of U.S. tariffs dropped completely.
We're in implementation mode. We're in action mode. So that's why the Minister of Public Safety is in contact with Tom Homan, the border czar of Trump. And I met with him along with the Minister of Immigration last Friday in Washington. That's why we've been in contact with him since then as well. And that's why also the RCMP Commissioner, the head of the CBSA, they're all working on making sure that is happening.
CP24 spoke to CTV public and safety analyst Chris Lewis about the new border security measures.
We spend more money to help other countries with their security issues than we do our own. And so, I mean, the police chiefs in Canada need to keep beating the drum And this needs to be a huge election issue. It shouldn't come because of the petulant child across the border ranting and raving about things that aren't even true. It should be about doing what's right for Canadians and at the same time toughening our border for things coming in, working closely with the Americans to help things going either way or help mitigate that. That's all a good thing, but it needs to have some meat to it.
Now, some elements of the government's border plan will require legislative changes to be passed by Parliament, which isn't scheduled to sit again until March 24th.
Well, truckers say that the now delayed tariffs being threatened by U.S. President Donald Trump would wreak havoc on their industry.
The president of the Canadian Trucking Alliance says the fallout could be the final nail in the coffin for many in his group's 5,000 transport companies already struggling because of weaker consumer demand. The manufacturing sector is seen as particularly vulnerable, which includes tens of billions of dollars in auto parts and vehicles hauled by truck to the U.S. from Canada.
Dennis Darby, CEO of the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters, joined CP24 Breakfast with more reaction.
Been 50 years of building up what I would call a really north-south infrastructure or supply chain. And so it's hard sometimes to even understand what's Canadian, what's American, or what's Mexican in terms of parts or ingredients. Canadian plastic styrene could go to the States, made into a product that comes back to Canada and then gets installed in a car. Similarly with packaging. Packaging could be started in Canada, sent back to Canada from the U.S. after it's been printed, and then put on a Canadian food product. So, we are really integrated. So this is first of all, this gives us a chance as Canadians to think about how do we make our manufacturing sector stronger, but also be prepared if Mr. Trump does go ahead with the tariffs and make sure that we are doing everything we can either to support workers and businesses, but also to make sure that we have a future that is successful for this sector.
Darby says many Canadian companies are already pulling back on new investments and hiring as they wait and see what happens when it comes to the tariffs.
Right now it's 5:44, holding at 7 below zero. This is Live at 5.
Coming up, new details in the fatal swarming of a Toronto homeless man during the trial of two girls charged in his death. Stay with us.
Two people have been shot dead. This happened during an attempted home invasion in eastern Ontario.
It happened on Sunday night in South Glengarry. That is near Cornwall. OPP say the two people were shot while trying to force their way into the home, and a third suspect got away. The people inside the home at the time were not hurt, but they were taken into custody, and a firearm was seized. OPP saying no charges have been laid, and they have since released, and those homeowners have since been released. The investigation, of course, continues. And for more on this case, we turn to our crime analyst, Steve Ryan, tonight. Steve, I guess this is a question of how do you know when self-defense has gone too far?
That's a great question. So for context, we do not have in Canada the stand your ground law as they do in the States, where you can protect your home at all costs. Here, you need to be met with the imminent threat of grievous bodily harm or death to you or to someone else. And that is the key. If you have a suspicion that that's going to happen, that's not going to fly. There needs to be hard evidence. So it's a gray area in the law. And I think this is why the OPP, when they were doing this investigation, why they arrested the two people in the home, and those two people more than likely provided an exculpatory reason as to what went on, and they released them, and the OPP may be doing their due diligence and get some legal guidance from a Crown before they decide whether or not they're going to lay charges or not. Okay, Steve, based upon your 30 years in law enforcement, this incident, what is the lesson to be learned for people who are at home, who would-be victims? Well, I think for crooks, too, don't break into somebody's home because this is what can happen to you. And if somebody breaks into your home, you need to know the law. If you are met with a threat, that threat needs to be above and beyond a suspicion. It's got to be an imminent threat of grievous, that's important, grievous bodily harm. So it can't be just somebody's going to assault you. There needs to be evidence of grievous bodily harm or death. And if that's the case, you can respond with as much force as you deem necessary. It's got to be proportionate. It's got to be proportionate to the threat.
The homeowners will obviously argue that they were caught off guard, right, that they felt unsafe, they felt their lives were in danger. Is that a sound defense? That in and of itself is not that you feel unsafe. There needs to be more evidence to suggest that the homeowners are going to be killed or they're going to be really badly injured. So I would suspect, based on the way the wording is in this press release, the OPP arrested the two people at the scene, which they had every right to do.
during the investigation, perhaps reasons were given by the two people as to what went on. Separate stories, of course. You never interview two people at the same place. You interview them separately. Then you compare those statements. If they matched one another, that may give some cause to this investigation. And this is why the OPP may have released the two of them. But because you were released after being arrested, you don't need to be charged if you're arrested, by the way. But once you're released after no charges are laid, if evidence suggests that charges could be laid, they can go back and arrest these two people any day.
Okay, now, Steve, I want to ask you about the role of video cameras. A lot of people don't have, home cameras inside, but a lot of people have those Ring doorbell cameras. What significance could the role of that footage play in all of this? Because it only, gets so much that outside.
Right. So the outdoor cameras will show how people are getting into your home, but what transpires in the home, unless you've got surveillance running inside the house, it's going to rely on witnesses. It's going to rely on the two people that were in the house, and they did what they felt they needed to do. At least one of them did. Now that needs to be justified, and this may be the gray area that the OPP are struggling with right now.
Okay, Steve Ryan, live in studio. Thanks for this, Steve.
Sure.
Well, more details are coming out during the trial of two girls charged in the swarming death of a Toronto homeless man.
Yeah, 2 of the 8 girls allegedly involved in the fatal assault, they're currently on trial in front of a judge alone. So today, the Crown alleged one of the girls, who was 14 at the time, could be seen on security footage holding a sharp object. The lead detective told the court he couldn't identify the object. The prosecution alleges that girl delivered the blow that led to Kenneth Lee's death. Now, the trial for the 2 girls, that's expected to last about 2 weeks.
It's 5:50 minus 7. You're watching Live at 5.
And coming up, U.S. President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, they're meeting in Washington right now.
U.S. President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, they are meeting in Washington this hour.
At the White House meeting, it comes as Netanyahu faces competing pressure from his right-wing coalition to end a temporary truce and resume the war against Hamas in Gaza, and from Israelis who want to see remaining hostages come home. Speaking to reporters before the meeting, Trump repeated his call for Palestinians to be resettled from Gaza.
And you could build 4 or 5 or 6 areas. It doesn't have to be one area, but you take certain areas and you build really good quality housing, like a beautiful town, like someplace where they can live and not die, because Gaza is a guarantee that they're going to end up dying. The same thing's going to happen again. It's happened over and over again, and it's going to happen again as sure as you're standing there, Peter. So, I hope that we could do something where they wouldn't want to go back. Who would want to go back? They've experienced nothing but death and destruction.
It is now 5:54 minus 7. This is Live at 5.
And police are trying to track down a person who abandoned their dog at a Georgina park. We're going to speak to the animal shelter for an update on how Winter, the dog, is doing. And police in New York region are trying to identify a person who left a dog tied to a pole at a park in Georgina.
And for more on this, we're joined live by Jennifer Yappa tonight, the animal shelter supervisor at the Georgina Animal Shelter. Thank you for joining us, Jennifer. How concerning. York police are describing this as an animal cruelty case. What more can you tell us about what happened and how is Winter doing?
Yes. So on Sunday, we did receive Winter. She arrived at the animal shelter, very nervous, but overall in pretty decent health condition. We do believe she is around 1 to 2 years of age. Yes, there she is. She's a very sweet girl. So, it's a really sad situation. I think it happens more often than ever these days. She was left just tied to the pole, as we saw in the video, and the potential owner drove off and left her there. So she's doing well. She's getting decompressing. It's important for animals when they've experienced different kinds of trauma or neglect to really have some time to adjust. And we just take our cues from them about what they need. And so that's what we're doing, taking each day by day with her.
Yeah.
Okay, and Jennifer, as we wrap up, what's the message for dog owners who may be overwhelmed with being a dog owner?
And that's fair. And I think that reaching out to your veterinarian, to dog trainers, to people in your community, to different animal shelters or rescues, doing your research and really being mindful and understanding what it is to be a pet owner and what the responsibility entails.
Okay, Jennifer Yappa, thank you so much for this conversation. We're so glad Winter's okay. Thanks,
Jennifer.
Thank
it's
you. Take care.
5:59, holding at 7 below zero. This is Toronto's breaking news, CP24.
And thank you so much for watching CTV News at 6. That's coming up next.